The engine coughed, a harsh, metallic rattle that died into a terrifying, hollow silence. The propeller slowed, stalled, and then the nose of the plane slammed into the dunes. Sand sprayed in a blinding arc, coating everything in grit. The pilot scrambled out of the cockpit, chest heaving, lungs burning from the sudden intake of hot, dry air. He clawed at his gear, dragging the equipment clear of the twisted metal wreckage. His hands shook, fumbling as he wiped the fine, abrasive dust from the camera lens. He stood, scanning the horizon for a landmark, for anything other than the endless, undulating ridges of sand. That was when the shadow fell. A boy stood 5 feet away. He held a glass bell jar, and inside, a single flower hung its head. The boy did not glance at the plane or the crater it had carved into the dune. He looked directly at the pilot, his eyes calm and unblinking. "Do you know how to draw a sheep?" the boy asked. The pilot gripped his canteen, his knuckles white. The fear of death had vanished, replaced by a cold, absolute bewilderment that left him unable to speak. The pilot sat on the sand, the canteen still heavy in his hand. He listened,
his breath slowing as the boy spoke. A home no larger than a house. 3 volcanoes, 1 dormant,
2 active, each cleaned with the precision of a chore. The boy talked of moving his chair to follow the light, watching the sunset 43 times in a single day. The pilot looked toward the vast, empty horizon, trying to map these words onto the reality of the Sahara. The scale was impossible. The logic was fragile. He looked at the boy, who stood waiting with an expectant gaze. The pilot reached into his pocket, pulled out a scrap of paper, and took a pencil from his kit. He drew a box with 3 holes. He held it out. "The sheep is inside," the pilot said.
The boy leaned forward, his face lighting up as he peered into the sketch, the tension of the crash.
The heat of the sun and the isolation of the dunes vanished. For a moment, the desert was not a place of survival, but a space where a box could contain a life. They walked. The sand shifted under their boots, a constant, sliding resistance that made every mile feel like 10. The horizon shimmered in the heat, an oasis hidden somewhere in the haze. The boy moved with a light, rhythmic stride, his focus constantly shifting to the ground. He stopped suddenly, pointing a finger at a small, armored shape scuttling through the sand. It was a scorpion.
Its tail arched in a defensive curve. "Does it have a heart?" the boy asked. The pilot looked down,
the heat pressing against his temples. He knelt, drawing a circle in the dust with his finger, trying to explain the mechanics of the world, the wind, the migration of birds, the harsh laws of survival. But the boy watched him with a steady, searching intensity that made the pilot feel exposed.
He spoke of his own life, of the ambitions he had buried under years of routine and neglect.
He talked of things he had long ago decided were irrelevant. The boy did not interrupt. He simply listened, his gaze reflecting a depth that made the vast, empty desert feel suddenly, uncomfortably small.
The pilot found himself searching for words he had not used in decades, his voice rasping against the dry air.
The sun dipped below the dunes, and the desert floor turned frigid. They sat together on a high ridge,
the stars emerging in a sharp, cold clarity. The boy hugged his knees, his gaze fixed on the darkness.
He began to speak of her, not as a plant, but as a presence.
He described the glass bell jar he had used to shelter her from the biting wind, and how she had demanded his constant attention with her thorns and her pride.
He spoke of the weight of being responsible for someone so fragile.
The pilot listened, the cold sand pressing against his palms.
But he felt a warmth rising in his chest that had nothing to do with the day's heat. He realized he had spent his life measuring the world by its weight,
its speed, and its utility. He had missed the essence entirely.
The boy's words acted like a chisel, breaking away the hardened layers of his own regret.
The pilot looked at his own hands, then up at the vast, uncaring sky. He felt the sudden, sharp ache of a man finding a door he thought had been walled up forever. He understood now.
The most essential things are never found with a compass or a map. They are held in the quiet, invisible spaces between people. The fourth morning arrived with a thin line of pale light bleeding across the eastern dunes. The boy stood up. He did not look at the wreckage of the plane, nor did he look back at the pilot. He simply began to walk. His movements were fluid, unburdened by the sand that had stalled the pilot for days. Within minutes, his silhouette had shrunk to a mere speck against the intensifying glow of the horizon. The pilot remained on the ridge, his muscles stiff from the cold night. He watched until the shimmering heat haze swallowed the boy entirely, leaving nothing but the vast, undulating landscape. The silence returned to the Sahara, but it was no longer the heavy, suffocating quiet of a tomb. It had changed. He reached into his pocket and felt the rough texture of the scrap of paper. He traced the edges of the box he had sketched. He looked up at the sky, where the last stars were fading into the blue. The desert was still immense, still indifferent, but the emptiness had vanished. It was replaced by a strange, quiet resonance. He took a breath, the air cool and sharp, and for the first time in his life, he was not looking for a way out. He was simply present, listening to the wind.